Hello, welcome to the Atelier with Alina Cho. I'm Andrew Bolton, curator in charge of the Costume Institute, and it gives me great pleasure to introduce tonight's guest, Gabriela Hearst. Gabriella actually joins us tonight only a week after she presented her remarkable inauguration collection for Chloé. And I'm sure Chloé's founder, another Gabby, Gabby Aguillon, would have approved of Gabriella's choice of venue wholeheartedly. She chose to show it at the Brasserie Lip, where Gabby herself showed her first collection in 1942, so exactly 100 years ago. Gabriella has called her Chloé collection the Aphrodite to her own brand's Athena, but grounding the collection was the same unyielding commitment to sustainability that Gabriella brings to her own label. And this commitment was really at the very heart of the collection. You know, it was included in the materials that Gabriella used and also the techniques that she employed. And the show actually culminated in outerwear repurposed from Overstock, Chloé Overstock, that was created with Shelter Suit, which is a non-profit organization providing aid to the homeless. And it's this kind of conscious creativity that led the British Fashion Council to award Gabriella the title of Environmental Honoree in 2015, which was the same year that the CFDA named Gabriella the Women's Wear Designer of the Year. But Gabriella's altruism and philanthropy actually extends way beyond fashion. And 3 years ago, she became a trustee of Save the Children. And she really is a pioneer in the truest sense of the word. And like all the best designers, she's her own muse and also her own best advertisement. And I'm thrilled that she's able to join us tonight for a conversation with Alina. And if you've ever attended any of our past ateliers, you'll know by now that Alina is an Emmy award-winning journalist with more than 20 years of experience, covering politics and world affairs as well as fashion. She's currently a contributor to CBS Sunday Morning, and prior to that, she was a national correspondent for CNN for nearly a decade. I'm extremely grateful to Ricky Gail Conway for sponsoring the Atelier series in memory of her mother, Doris Tananbaum. And Doris, like Ricky, was a great friend of the Met. So I'm super excited to hear tonight's conversation. So please join me in welcoming Gabriella and Alina.
Andrew, thank you very much for that beautiful introduction. Gabby, it's great to see you. It's great to see both of you. I'm not going to lie, on this beautiful night in New York, I do wish that we were all together in person in front of a live audience at the Met, but this is the world we're in right now, and so I'm going to take what I can get. Gabby, there's so much that I want to talk to you about tonight, but before we get started, I do want to personally thank our sponsor, Ricky Gail Conway, who, as you just heard from Andrew, supports this series in memory of her mother, Doris. Ricky Gail, I think you're watching tonight, and if you are, I want to thank you from the bottom of my heart. None of this would be possible without you. And with that, Gabby Hearst. You have had a very big month, I think it's safe to say. You presented 2 collections on 2 continents in a matter of weeks. In fact, you're just back from Paris, and exactly a week ago, as Andrew said, you presented your very first collection for Chloé. You know you had rave reviews, but I was surprised to hear yesterday that you don't read them. Why not?
First, I want to thank you both for having me here and thank for everyone that makes it possible, because it's a dream, right? And as it's a dream to be able to do these 2 collections and have this opportunity to creatively communicate. And so I don't read the reviews. I joke to my bosses that I don't want to read them because I've become more confident than I already are. So it's like, you don't want me to be overconfident. So I think, no, I'm just kidding. I think it's better to be driven by what you're seeing and what the goal is. And I don't want to be distracted from what I see the mission to be accomplished.
I think I'd like to ask you a little bit about just how logistically you were able to manage all of this, because you live in New York, your Chloé team is in Paris, you were simultaneously working on GH, the Gabriella Hearst collection, and oh, by the way, we're in the middle of a global pandemic. So how were you able to just do it all and get it done?
Well, I mean, great teams, one. and I like complicated and I like the challenge. But I think that because Chloe is a language that I can speak clearly, I was prepared to hit the ground running, as they say. And so I think that was, I had a very straight vision of what to do, and it was a matter of executing. So there wasn't a lot of deliberation. It was like, okay, we're going this way.
Yeah, I find it interesting. You've said actually that you'll have an idea and you actually know instinctively whether it's for Chloe or for Gabriella Hearst right away, right?
Yes, it's a big question I had. I didn't know how my brain or wherever ideas come from, the subconscious, how that was going to happen, and immediately I know. And these two languages are so clear to me.
Mm-hmm. Let's talk a little bit about the collection itself, because it was quite a collection. The New York Times declared there's a new Chloe girl in town. But of course, you don't know that because you didn't read it. but there's a new Chloe girl in town.
I was told it was good.
Yeah, I'm just letting you know. So tell me, who is this new Chloe girl, and what was it that you wanted to say with this first very important collection that you were doing for Chloe?
Well, I think actually it's a Chloe woman. I wanted to have this ageless, uncategorized way of seeing femininity, right? So I wanted to make sure that it was for everyone, and you can feel however you want to feel in any of these stages. And that was like the idea was to, as I'm not a logo designer per se, is to really, how do you create a product that says Chloe with what codes? And so I obviously did my homework, and the scallop and the broderie anglaise are very Chloe language established decades ago. The scallop was by Gavi and Young's first collections, and the broderie anglaise was very carved. And so those languages were important for me to be able to communicate and bring them in a different way.
I want to show an item that you opened with, which we're lovingly calling the puffcho, right?
Yes.
Which I'd like to think is named for me, but I don't think it is. But I'd like to talk about just your ideas. I mean, to me, this is kind of perfect for outdoor dining. So I'd like to put in an order for one. I think I like the black one. But tell me about this collection was also, you're very big on sustainability, and I want to delve deeper into that a bit later. But this collection was far more sustainable than last fall's, and you actually went into the archives, took materials from the history of Chloe, from past collections, and used them, repurposed them. Right? Talk about that.
So the puffcho. I was saying it in a review, and somebody says, is that a brand of cereal? I'm like, no, it's a new type of garment. It was I actually had this idea because I photographed it on November 26th, where I was thinking, this is like how it's going to happen. Because I was in the countryside an hour away in Garrison, New York, and I was wearing my poncho, and I put a puffer, and I was like, there you go, we need a puffcho in this life. And I remember telling my it's both my codes, right? It's the tradition of making a poncho, that it's something I grew up with all my family wearing, and also the 20 years of living in New York City, the 20 years of urban living, and also in a house where capes are part of the code.
Mm-hmm. I want to talk a little bit too about just how you got the job, because I read that you submitted a 92-page proposal when you applied for the job. Now, I want to remind everyone who's watching about the long history of Chloé. I mean, Chloé is a house that was founded, as Andrew said, by another Gabby, a Gabby Aguillon in 1952. They've had a long history, and many, by the way, many very high-profile designers along the way: Karl Lagerfeld, Stella McCartney, Phoebe Philo, to name a few, and now Gabriella Hearst. I know that you, like I, believe a little bit in fate, right? You know, the Gabby with a Y founded the house, and you're Gabby with an I. What did you say to the people who run Chloé about why you should have the job?
Well, at first I met my future boss, and I said to him to stop looking. I was like, come on, my name is Gabby. So I think he thought I was maybe a bit insane, which there's part of a truth there. But then when he saw my commitment, when I prepare a 92-page presentation that looked at the brand in every single angle, from the way we would be branding and coding to how the stores would look, to how it would be, how it's my perception of the business in China, what would the protocols for sustainability be. And so I think he realized that the insanity comes with a lot of purpose and a lot of commitment to the hard work.
You know, I think that it's unbelievable. I think your husband said that, you could have hired somebody to do a 92-page proposal, right? You know, it was pretty detailed. I think, too, that people might forget, because we spent a little bit of time talking about Chloé, that you have a whole nother brand.
Yes.
The Gabriella Hearst brand. And just 3 weeks ago, you showed your fall ready-to-wear collection for 2021. You shot it at a Brooklyn warehouse. You had this incredible music with these incredible drummers.
Yes.
And you know, if you had this distinct idea of who the Chloé woman is, who is your Gabriella Hearst woman?
She's my Athena. She's a woman that has her scars, right? Physical and emotional. She's gone through C-sections, biopsies, the things we go. And she's a leader in her field. She will never travel in an airport with a tracksuit pant. She is someone where her family is her main creation, and she's politician, leader, woman of service, strength. Like in my head is like a Nancy Pelosi, strategically a politician that knows how to move, knows how to persevere. If she has to cut someone in the knees to get to what she needs to go, she'll do it. So she's more fierce in a way.
I loved when I saw the collection. I have to say I was a little surprised, pleasantly surprised, when I saw these beautiful florals in your collection, because you don't do a lot of florals. And then I found out that they were inspired by your daughter Mia's drawings.
Yes, my daughter actually, she's commissioned the resort print, by the way. So she did this drawing. I noticed she was doing these drawings and looking at botanical books and looking at pictures online to recreate these flowers. And she's going to be 13 in June, and seeing her transformation on how she's really becoming this very creative source. And I thought that they were so beautiful. So I said to her, can I use them? And she said, yes. She didn't think twice about it. And then we created the print, but it came out beautiful. And we also recreated it in those crochet cashmere, recycled cashmere flowers that you see. And those were made by a non-for-profit in Bolivia.
What did she say when she saw the finished product?
She is a little socially awkward. So in private, she will tell you this. So that's why she gets shy when people say to her, but she was tremendously proud.
I'm sure.
Yes, she was. And I think it's important for kids this age. It's a very hard time to grow up. in general, for many children, it's been a tough pandemic. It's been a troubled political scene. They're looking at, older generation of my kids they're thinking they're not going to have children because of the consequences of climate change. So it's tough growing up. So for them to have these place where creativity will bring you joy, and creativity will bring you a path to how we can transform for the better. I think the more you foster that early on, we'll all be benefiting from it.
Well, you might have to bring her into the studio at some point and
she
give her,
can't.
give her an official job, when she's old enough to work. When I saw those floral prints, I must say I was reminded of another ensemble you recently created for, you're smiling because our now First Lady, Jill Biden. I mean, what an incredible moment this was for any designer. But for you, you're relatively new still, right? I mean, you've been in the game for a long time, but your brand is still relatively young, all things considered. But tell me about this outfit. She wore it for the inaugural evening festivities on what really is arguably one of the most important nights of her life, right? So what an honor. Tell me about the outfit, and tell me what it was like to collaborate with Jill Biden.
Well, it was... First of all, it's an honor, right? And I am so grateful because this whole outfit was made in the garment district, and it was made out of dead stock, and it was embroidered in the garment district. And as you know very well, we're going through a tough time in this part of our industry, and to do something that involved so many people doing the embroidery. Some of those flowers were between 2 and 4 hours, and the placement was months in looking at how it would place well and beautifully. And it's each flower of every state. The concept was always unity, because I believe that in order to confront what we are the conflicts that we need to overpass as for the survival of our species, we have to do it together. And I think that this polarization that we've been living we need to evolve for our own sake. I think that anything that divides us is anti-evolution. And so unity was the message behind it. And for me, it was also made out of dead stock. So it was important that we had something that had low impact, but it was still very beautiful. Mm-hmm. And what really moved me was the concept was done before the attack on the Capitol. Mm-hmm. And as those images traveled worldwide, then to show that America, that the garment district can make beautiful, sophisticated, detailed things was something special. And to see the enthusiasm and effort of the teams was really moving, and everybody's just so excited.
Well, when you saw her, because you never do know, right, if they're going to wear your outfit. How did you find out, and what was your reaction?
Well, I knew. We knew because we had to do the fittings, and my kind team, I was already starting at Chloé, right? And my kind team had to drive to Delaware and then drive to Washington with, all the parameters of COVID and all the, but we're a very small team in design. We're just like 3. And so it was very moving. All the effort and excitement of like, we're doing this, but yeah, so we're honored.
Well, and especially for an administration that you personally support. I'm not sure that people know this, but you actually became a U.S. citizen not too long ago. And this was the first presidential election that you voted in on what is arguably one of the most important presidential elections of our time, right? So I'm curious to know, that must have been a moving experience for you. What was that like?
Oh yes, we went with my husband to vote, and I got teary-eyed afterward, and especially because I know what it means. It means a chance to really combat climate change, which is the number one security threats that we're confronting, and to be able to have even a chance, because we don't have a lot of years left to try to revert this situation. I think it gave me hope. And also the fact that our first lady is an educator, that also gives me hope as well, because we know that a lot of our travels right now are based on if we improve our educational systems, we will have better outcomes.
You mentioned climate change, and anybody who knows anything about you knows how important sustainability is to you, and fighting climate change. I want to talk about where it all came from, because it really started for you in your childhood. I'm not sure many people know this, but your childhood really did inform who you are, not just as a person, but certainly as a fashion designer. But it wasn't exactly conventional.
No.
You grew up truly off the grid, 2.5 hours from the nearest city, on a 17,000-acre ranch in Uruguay, with more animals. Yeah, that's it. With more animals than people. I mean, I've seen video and images of it. It is just extraordinarily, it's breathtakingly beautiful. But what was it like, and how did it shape you?
I didn't know any other reality. That's my mom and my dad, and this is me as a baby. And that would be a Sunday when we are or a Saturday probably a Sunday, because that's where jineteadas are held, which is our rodeo. I love that knit that my mother is wearing, because it's a hand knit with the virgin wool, which is not dyed. You see the brown sheep wool and the ivory, and it was very much my normal. And we grew up sustainable from a utilitarian perspective, but also that's my mom and my dad, and also and my brother, and also the appreciation of quality, but not from an ostentatious perspective, but really from a utilitarian aspect as well, because things have to last. So intrinsically, those two languages are in me, and realizing that you can have the strength of nature. You can see it when you're a child, right? When you see, I've seen a lighting, burn down a house, or I've seen, I had experiences with the horses just take off, and you need to realize what to do as a child. I don't. That's
oh my God.
You got some good content. There's always a picture of me and a horse as a kid. I don't remember when I was taught how to ride horses. I remember when I was taught how to ride a bicycle or swim. But you learn.
I think you might have been put on a horse like right shortly after birth, maybe.
Oh yes, for sure. Because my mom had to go from my grandfather's ranch to the ranch of my dad by horse, because it was quicker, and we would have to cross rivers. And apparently that's my mom. And
I want to talk about your parents. Yeah. Your parents are extraordinary. Your father, we talked about this a bit backstage beforehand, but you and I both lost our fathers in 2011. He just looks so extraordinary and like such a warm, wonderful man. But what was he like? And I know that to this day, he inspires you and you believe guides you, right?
Yes. He was an entrepreneur. My mom's family comes from a ranching family, which is very traditional. And usually in Uruguay, if you were not born in a ranching family, you were not going to, it was very hard to be a rancher if that was not the circumstance, because it's just the way how it was done. But my father's life was his dream, as my dream is to be a fashion designer, was to really have a ranch and be a rancher. He grew up in Salto, and he started from the bottom up, and he was really savvy in his skills on business. And I think that I learned a lot from him in that sense, and also the things that he valued. He valued very small details. He valued things that were important for him. A line that he says all the time was "cosas chicas para el mundo, pero grandes para mí," which means small things for the world, but big for me. And that way of him being, and he had a very precise aesthetic eye, I have to say. He had a very, I think my aesthetic perception comes from him as well. And so he has influenced as much as my mom has influenced me as well in different ways. My mom taught me, because she was she competed in rodeo, and I grew up in a country which at that time I was born during the dictatorial period. And
I mean, this photo of your mother, we can't really zoom in on it, but I was able to zoom in on it earlier. And you and I were talking about this. You look just like her. It's unbelievable. And even though your coloring is different, your face, it's very similar. But this is the photo you have right behind you in your office, right?
This is I call it the Genesis photo, because this photo has always been the inspiration for me. Even on my first brand that we started still screening T-shirts in Brooklyn, Candela, that was the image of my mom on a horse with the wings. And this photo has been the strength, and that's why it's there, because it taught me that women have this, as they're so strong, right? Like one of the first images of my mom that I have as a child is her being thrown by a horse, her mouth bleeding, teeth coming out, and she just walking towards me like nothing happened. And I love it when I told it to her recently, and she couldn't believe I remembered. And I'm like, Mom, it's traumatic. That's what I remembered. It's like,
I mean, but I read, and correct me if I'm wrong, she competed in the rodeo at age 18. She was a Taekwondo black belt in her 30s.
Second dan, not just black belt. Like she went to the second dan period.
Oh my God. She was weightlifting in her 50s. She's a fifth generation cattlewoman. She exercises 2 hours a day to this day, and still lives off the grid.
And meditates, because she's a Zen Buddhist. She's also becoming a Zen monk in Uruguay. The probabilities are really
low.
She actually cultivated that belief system. So she was a radical. When I think about it, she was a radical that fought the status quo, what women could do or not do.
You obviously, as we've pointed out, lived off the grid. You weren't near any sort of fashion capital. It's not like you were jetting off to Paris or London or Milan or New York. And yet, as a child, I read that you were sketching all the time. And I heard you say that at 16, you sketched an entire line of shoes. I mean, where do you think that came from?
It's a lot of it had to do with some fire in me that I felt since I was a child, that I had to communicate, because it's also, I learned how to read and write in English first and Spanish. And I also, it felt that, and apparently I used to tell to everyone, that I was just going to go off in the world. And I actually went to study in Australia at 17, which is like I randomly picked, like I want to go to Australia to study. And I applied to this scholarship when everybody told me that's never going to happen. I was very curious of the world and very hungry. But I think that because it didn't have TV in the ranch, we had radio and we had books. So imagination was really my toy. Like that was, when I tell my son, I only got presents, for my birthday and for Christmas and El Día del Niño, like 3 times. That's it. You had.
I love that line, imagination was my toy, because it does now make sense. I mean, I just didn't get it before. I thought she was totally off the grid. Like, where does it all come from? But when you say that, and I know that you say sometimes things choose you.
Yeah.
But, people, I didn't know this until I read it. It didn't surprise me that you did a short stint in Paris in the late 90s as a model. And then you came to New York to go to acting school, and that wasn't exactly a right fit either. But then you graduated, and you needed a job, so you you almost, correct me if I'm wrong, but you almost fell into fashion, right? And you ended up working, maybe it wasn't your first job, but you ended up working for Le Coq Sportif. And I love how you talk about this particular job.
Yes. So this rare opportunity also came to be a model in Next in Paris. I was 21 years old, which was already old to be a model. And I remember my agency telling me to lie to say that I was 19. I was studying communications. I actually wanted to do audiovisual production. And I remember I had to drop out of college, and it was like a big thing. I remember a friend telling me, but what are you going to do about your retirement? I'm like, retirement?
You're like, I'm going to Paris. I'm going to be a model.
Exactly. So there I went. My dad used to say, you have the courage of a puma, which is our type of animal, because I just like took off. And that was a learning experience, definitely. I was not very good at following instructions, so that really made me not a good model. And I have such respect for models because I know how grueling it is to do it and go. And you know, we had to show the books, you know, and they would look at it, and like it's but you learn rejection. Mm-hmm. And I that lesson, you know, to be, because you unless you're like on the top 5 models, you know, percentage, you get rejected for the majority of the jobs you go to.
Sure.
And so you learn to be rejected, which is a great lesson to learn, right?
Totally.
To
100%.
To handle that. And 100%. So everything I learned that I didn't like, I learned from, and then my showroom, when I was working for Apropos showroom, Uri Alter was my boss. And I was in charge of doing the commercial direction of selling Le Coq Sportif in the US, and you know, I was rebrought at the time by a new ownership, and they were late on the delivery, so I had to call Bloomingdale's and say, I'm sorry, it's 120 days late. You know, so but I learned how to I learned about the commercial. You gotta meet your deadlines. You gotta meet your delivery dates. And the earlier you deliver, the better it's gonna be for your sell through. So those early lessons were there, and I really did not enjoy that job. And my boss kept on telling me, "Be creative in sales. You can be creative." I was like, "Oh, you know what? There's something there." And then when he fired me, I gave him the huge hug.
Only you would do that.
Yeah, and I've worked for myself. I haven't had a boss since then. I haven't had a boss for 17 years. And I keep on reminding my boss every day now.
But, you know, I think it's interesting because even at a job that you were fired from, you see it now, and it's smart too, as an incredible learning experience. You know, you really learned the business side of things, and you also learned that you wanted to move into the creative side of things. And so in 2004, you launched, you alluded to this earlier, you launched a contemporary line called Candela. And you had a moment. But from there, I want to know how you got from there to deciding that what you really wanted to do and what your real passion was doing luxury, and which brings us to the Gabriella Hearst line, which you launched in 2015. So what was the original thinking behind that line, GH, Gabriella Hearst?
Yeah.
What was it that you wanted to say? Because I always think that the best designers and the ones who are most successful are really filling a white space, right? You see a white space of what's not there, like what do I need that I don't see in the marketplace? Yeah. What was it that you didn't see that you wanted to do?
Yes, it's funny you talk about that white space, because it was exactly a white space. The Candela was my school, was basically after all the trial and error. And this is why I always say it's so important to fail at things, to learn how to fail, because people think success is like this, and it's really like a mixture of learning experiences. But Candela was basically like, or I make it work, or I go sell cattle with my father in Uruguay, because my father was like, you know, like that's it. Your life in New York is like, come on, this is not realistic. And so we had to make it work. So Candela went from zero, like $700 to $1 million in revenue in 1 year. So that, we were 3 partners, and that started to help me pay the bills and living in New York. So that was my financial independence and the way that I supported myself. But it was a contemporary price point. And it was also the boom of the Zara's and the H&M's. And our first office was 39th and 8th Avenue. And, I go when I take the kids to school through there, and I'm like that, those are my origins, it's like that's Garment District.
Of course. That's where you learned.
Exactly. And I have a great appreciation from that learning experience. And GH was really understanding because I really thought, after I inherited my father's ranch and I was dealing with preserving his dream and making sure that this is something my children are going to have as well, right? And so for me, it was very important to make sure, why would we create a new brand? Nobody needs a new brand in the world, right? Mm-hmm. So we actually did we hired CFDA was doing this program that you could hire interns from different universities. And we had an intern from Harvard, and we did this analysis where we thought, where's the space? And there was this space on the high end for products that were well made, mm-hmm. with a long-term view, instead of the very polluted, more fashion focus. So that's where we went.
Well, I think it's really interesting because you, I've heard a few designers say this, but you like to say to your clients, buy one sweater, buy one great sweater, not 10, which I think is so interesting from a woman who's trying to sell things, right? But having said that, I feel like, the dress I'm wearing tonight is sort of Exhibit A. I bought it around the time that you opened your store on Madison Avenue, and I think I wore it to that opening. But then I've worn it subsequently to, there we are.
Yeah, you are.
But I've worn it subsequently so many times, and it's the dress that I always grab for when I don't know what to wear. That was an interview I did recently with Leonard Lauder for CBS Sunday Morning, and I wore it again. That was last fall. I wore it again recently. But isn't that the point? Isn't that what you're trying to do?
That's exactly the point. Timeless design. I believe in, first of all, I'm so honored, and because you just look so beautiful and it makes me so happy. This is really like what gives me the purpose. But
thank you.
I think that longevity on the product, it's really something that is important for me. And so you can achieve that by integrity of the material and integrity of the construction. And that's been the focus of our company, and that's the focus of the type of product that I want to make. I just don't think I can make a trend-based product. I'm not.
Mm-hmm. Well, and I don't think that that's how people want to dress. Or I think if you're a smart consumer, that you always have that in your mindset. I want to talk about sustainability because I think a lot of people might be surprised. Sustainability is such a buzzword. Everybody talks about it, but you don't just talk the talk, you really walk the walk. And I think people might be surprised to learn the lengths to which you go to be sustainable. It's not just the clothes. It's not just using recycled materials. It's the hangers. It's the packaging. It's the stores themselves. You have this really 360 vision of sustainability, and that's pure. And I want you to talk about it because I think a lot of people would be surprised to learn that it's not just what you see and what you put on your back. It goes way beyond that.
Yes, it's really trying to prove a model, and that, like, I love that hanger that you show me, because now this one is 3 point. I don't know if you can see it, but this is 3 point. You can't see it, but that's 3 point.
I can see it now.
That's 3 point. That's version 3.3 of the hanger, because the first recycled ones, the coats were breaking, but we work with the supplier because they're made out of a recycled cardboard. And so sustainability, it's the vehicle in which we're going to survive as a species. So my main mission that wakes me up in the morning, because I care about my children and other people's children and the next generation, is the fact that if we don't find a way of how to do business that is in sync with our environment, we're not going to be able to progress. And I'm very concerned of that. So if I'm in a small way, how we were doing at GH, trying to put these principles in practice and then seeing them being scalable, let's say at Chloé, like those hangers are going to be used at Chloé after we went through the whole research and development, it makes me feel so proud. Because
well, and I think people might also be surprised to learn that the merino wool that you use, it was actually your husband's idea, right?
Yes.
The merino wool is actually sourced from your ranch in Uruguay. It's extraordinary.
I just want to say that my husband is my muse. Look, my husband is my muse. My husband, I've been very lucky that I have courageous leadership behind me, because I couldn't do, we were in when we shipped, just to go back to the hangers, right? Because it's a small detail that matters. We were shipping hangers, 99% of all the plastic hangers go into a landfill. And we worked in a whole year as a small company to make these new hangers. And we were going to ship to department stores that were rejecting it and were going to give us chargebacks. And this was, millions of dollars maybe would be compromised on an order. So I call my husband, and my husband says, no, you have to push back. You cannot ship on plastic hangers. And we push back, and people adapted. So to have the support of leaders that that believe in what you're seeing, and luckily I have that also at Chloé, makes it, it's the I'm the catalysis, and then you need the force.
That's right. That's right. Well, you need the support. No one can do it alone. We talk about the sustainability and being mindful and of the earth, right, and art and nature. But you also are a designer who's trying to sell things, and I think it is every designer's dream to create an it bag, and right out of the gate. I mean, it's unbelievable. You started your line in 2015. In 2016, boom, you launched the Neena bag, named for Nina Simone, which I know you like to call the Powerball. It's been seen on so many celebrities and high-profile people, including the Duchess of Sussex, who we all saw in the interview just a few days ago. It's such a unique design. How did you even come up with it?
It was, I had my friend Ben called me and said, because we launched with ready to wear and shoes, and it was like, you can't be walking around with somebody else's bag. I said, that's a good point. So I did it for myself. We worked I worked like with the leisure of the whole work of like the time was not, it was 8 months developing it. And then I was on the prototype. And as we said, some things choose you. I remember being with a prototype in Claridge's, and Johnny Ive is in the elevator, and I didn't recognize him. And he says, that's a wonderful bag. I'm like, it's a prototype.
Yeah, Johnny Ive, who formerly of Apple.
Yes. And I said, oh, I'm thinking of doing 25 of them. That was the initial number in my head.
Oh my gosh. Were you surprised when it was such a hit?
I was, but what I am more grateful is that I have those principles of long-term view and sustainability. So instead of like flooding the gates, we really decided to, again, thanks to the support, is to really, let's use this to build our own channels. So we decided to, because long-term view, it made the brand become very famous with no real, if we would sell to everyone that wanted the bag. And then from a sustainability point of view, was taking double the amount of natural resources from this planet to make the same money. So it
that's right.
Makes sense.
And I think the other way of saying that is that you controlled your distribution. You decided you only wanted to sell them instead of shipping them off to department stores and what have you, where frankly you could have made millions upon millions of dollars, but you've made a very conscious decision to
and then
not
a pandemic would hit you, and then you would have to fire 3/4 of your staff. But thank God we maintained small, and we chose, and we could survive the pandemic. So I think that it's a matter of, I'm glad we make those choices,
Right.
I'm glad.
Because we are doing this talk in conjunction with the Met and the Costume Institute, of course, we always like to talk about art. And I was surprised to learn that your fine jewelry, which I love, by the way, is inspired by one particular painting.
Yes, it's the presentations of Christ to the people, and those rings. Everybody's always told me that known me that says you have to make jewelry, and when I remember seeing that painting at the Prado, actually in Spain, I was just like, that's the jewelry I want to make. No precious stones, just lapis lazuli, tiger eye, malachite, howlite, which looks like marble, and so rose quartz there. So I think that it really, I'm truly moved by minerals and geodes and what the beauty that this earth can make. But my husband's mom, Austin Hearst, she has the Clover dress is in the Met, which was her dress.
Oh, wow.
So yeah, so I one time, I want to tell you this little story very quickly. One time I went to the Met archives to look at men's construction because we were launching men's, and I wanted to see. And when we went to the archives in Long Island, I remember seeing a suit. I'm like, that's not a men's suit, because the proportion looks like a women's suit. And I looked at it, and when the tag, obviously everything's with gloves, and it was my mother-in-law, my husband's mother's suit. Wow. So I felt it was such a sign, because she was somebody that loved fashion so much, and she donated all her clothes to the museum. So it was really touching for me. So the fact that
and to be drawn to that particular piece, and then to find out your personal connection, that's incredible. While we're on the subject of the Met, you have been to the Party of the Year more than a few times.
Yeah.
You went in 2017 with Laura Dern, in 2018 with Uma Thurman, and 2019 with Denai Guerrera.
Yeah.
Everybody always wants to know what it's like to be inside the Met Gala, but I'm curious to know what it was like. Isn't it nerve-wracking walking? I mean, it is the most intimidating red carpet, or pink as it were here, I think, in the world. Were you nervous going up those steps? And what is it like to be inside that party?
Well, first of all, I'm there to service the talent, right? And so
yes, I know, but
the attention is on them. It's really easy to just focus on what they need, so they are comfortable. And so I just put myself in, like, work mode. And then but it's daunting, right? It's like, whoa.
I mean, hello.
And then once you walk, but my favorite anecdote from the Met was with Laura Dern. She's like an amazing talent, and I have to tell you that after she went and thanked all the policemen afterwards. They're keeping the security safe. She's a lady with capital L. And we went in, and I said to her, my best friend Stephanie is a fan of Pete Sampras. Not Pete Sampras. She'll kill me. What is the tennis player? God.
Roger Federer.
Okay. So this is how much I know about tennis. Roger Federer. And I said, I knew he was in the party, so I have to take a picture of Roger Federer. And she was like, I have to take a picture of one of the Jonas Brothers for my daughter. So the mission of the night was to help each other complete our missions. So we both got the pictures.
So you could be super cool in the eyes of kids and friends. Yes, absolutely. This goes by so quickly, but I think I just would like to end with talking about this. We've heard the word unprecedented so much, but it really has been an unprecedented year. We're still living in this global pandemic. I'd like to remind people you're not just a designer of two brands, Chloé and your own. You also run your father's ranch in Uruguay, and you're a wife and a mother of three. And one would sort of take all of that information and sort of think to themselves, well, maybe that person might take this opportunity to slow down a little bit, and yet you have stepped on the gas pedal. And so I'm curious to know what drives you? What keeps you going? Because it certainly isn't sleep, because you're not getting a lot of that, right?
I actually am, because I have an aura ring that detects that my sleep. So I'm actually really good at that.
Good.
My husband gave me this.
Good.
But I am very motivated in, I see a true chance of being able to prove a model if we can make a product that's low impact to the environment. And I feel that chance is worth every effort. And because for example, in Chloé, I feel very comfortable with the language, creatively speaking. So we can focus on the other important aspect. But if that can be done, and in a bigger company, you need different elements. You need your CEO to be embracing it. You need your head of production. You need your sustainability department, and you need the creative director that also wants that to happen, because it will never cross over the head of production telling the designer what fabric to use.
Right.
So if you didn't do your homework, or you really didn't have the time to train yourself like that, and this has been my training and my passion for the past over 6 years. So I think that it's this ability and this chance of applying it. I don't know if it would have come up. Sometimes things choose you, you know.
Mm-hmm. And just finally, I'm curious to know, if you had to boil it down, what were maybe the one or two biggest lessons you've learned over the past year? I mean, I know I've learned a lot about myself. You know, you've had some time to think, to look inward, right?
Well, I am very. I think that we all, in some degree, went through trauma, right? And some people more than others. And I feel that I trusted my gut and my intuition more than my brain, I would say, because it's impaired by all the different inputs that we were getting. And so it was trusting my intuition and seeing how to use that to navigate, which, when you're coming from South America, you're used to dealing. We had one year foot and mouth disease in Uruguay. Mm-hmm. So it was all paralyzed, the family business. There was no income. There was no way to. And my father, instead of slowing, he went and bought more cattle, took a bet. So I think that in a way, sometimes there's the concept of Shangxia, of really opportunities lurking in a conflicted time. And so there are lessons to be learned. There is lessons to adapt, and there's changes to be made. You know, I always believe that we learn from every single challenge that we have.
Mm-hmm. Well said, well said. And trusting your gut, I think, is so important. And I think more people should be doing that who aren't. So very good lesson. Gabby Hearst, it's so great to see you. Again, I wish we were in person. I look forward to the day I see you in person. I want to thank you for your time. I know that you've said that time is the ultimate luxury. And so I'm so grateful that you decided to choose a few minutes to spend with us. It's meant a lot to me. And I know it's meant a lot to the Met and everybody watching. So thank you so much.
The honor is all mine. I could speak to you for hours.
Oh, thank you.
And I hope we can do it in person soon and have a good time, and maybe the Carlisle.
Ah, yes. Let's go meet at the Carlisle for your San Ambrose cookies, your favorite cookies. All right, Gabby Hearst, thank you so much. Thank you all of you for watching. We'll see you very, very soon.
Bye.
Bye.